Hello, and welcome to Mike Drops the Mic. I'm Mike Lyman. Today, I have the pleasure and the honor of being joined by Jesse Stewart. Jesse is a former U.S. Army Ranger, and he served many years overseas, where he eventually retired at the rank of Major. He is author of two books, Un-Winnable Wars, Finding Victory from the Ashes, and The Phoenix Project. He's a motivational speaker, the founder of AM 300, and he's a coach advisor for the U.S. Olympic Snowboard Team. Jesse, how you doing this morning?
Doing well, my friend. And just to make one little correction there in the end, I am an advisor to the athletes. So the team is separate. And at the time, I think when you may have pulled that bio, we were in a little more official capacity, but just want to clarify that for any people out there that get bored and want to nitpick at stuff. Plus, I want to make sure to support the coaches out there because I love those guys and they don't need any distractions.
Absolutely. So thank you again for talking with me so early this morning. I know it's about 6 a.m. your time. I'm assuming.
Oh my gosh, Jocko's been posting on Instagram for like 2 hours now. So blah, 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 blah.
I'm assuming this is not how your typical morning starts out. So I've heard that you're a fan of meditation and taking time to reflect. Well, what does a typical morning look like for you?
Okay, so again, to clarify, I hate meditation. I'm not a fan. It sucks. It's painful, but I do it every day, and it's become part of my process that I will fight to protect. For me, I was just having a conversation with a yoga, actually the first male full-time yoga instructor I've ever met a couple of days ago at Core Power, and we were talking about my process with yoga and stuff, and I said, if I would have had yoga and meditation when I was an Army Ranger, when I was commanding Charlie Troop, the unit behind me, I don't think my recovery would have been this steep. And the fact that I was unwilling to recognize it back then, and like when I reconnect with some of my former Rangers, and they're like, "You're doing meditation, yoga? Like that's the last thing I would have expected you to do, sir." And I'm like, "Yeah, I get that, but it's something that is like." Teaching myself to slow down has made me faster, and it's absolutely true. And if I don't do it, then I suffer the consequences down the road, and so does everybody else. And what I mean by that is, your intention at the beginning of the day is going to that's a rudder of your ship for your day, right? That's going to set the course. If you don't set it, the first person that you run into is going to set it for you. Well, 99.99% of people operate on an intention of chaos, because they don't set intentions and they let everybody else set them for them. And it's a perpetual chaos storm. So if you don't set your intention, someone else is going to, and it's most likely to be a chaos. And you get frustrated and you look at the end of the day, why didn't I get anything done? Well, I'll tell you, if you go back and set your intention, and for me, my intention is always stillness and focus, being with, and then whatever I'm focusing on being, not doing, but being. So I'm with my daughters is to be the father they need to be. If I'm going to mentor someone, to be the mentor. If I'm going to be mentee, to be the mentee. So to be in this state of presence and being rather than being focused on a checklist. And so if I do not do that, people suffer. And people will call me out on it. Jesse. And so, they'll kind of hassle me about my little sadhanas and stuff, but it's they recognize the benefit, and there's several of them that'll come over here early in the morning, come join me for it. They won't tell anybody they're doing it, but it works. But sitting there, my process is pretty basic. It's called sadhana. It's like 7 to 8 upper body exercises, seated, designed at opening my spine from the base all the way up to my neck, and then a 5-minute 4-count breath meditation to end it. So it's nothing extensive, but I'll tell you what, 5 minutes of being in my own head, that is it's like a 18-month deployment in some ways for me. And so, but after I've done that, and I'll say that's one of the hardest things for me, I've now accomplished something in a day, and I can then create some stillness to the inherent chaos so I'm going to walk into, but it gives me an opportunity to set my intentions and put things on my own ground. And no one likes to be told what to do. So if you can tell yourself what to do and your intention, why would you not do it? Why would I not do it? Sure. And the amazing thing is, if chaos can be spread, or maybe stillness could be spread as well. And if I truly care about the people that I desire to serve and reach and impact, then I owe that to them. So, and ultimately owe it to myself as well.
Sure. And I love how you said about how you do your meditation, but you're not necessarily a fan of it. And I think a lot of people have that same mindset with working out as well, because you know how good it is for you. And you do it no matter how difficult it is, because you know it's going to better yourself throughout the day.
Well, the workout thing I think is a little easier only because you can get away with taking pictures while you're doing it, right? So you can post
Oh,
it on the gram.
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
can post it on the gram. Meditation, if you post it on the gram, we're gonna call you out on it. It's be like,
Yeah,
are you really meditating? Come on, dude.
exactly.
I've got some picture, like oftentimes if it's someone new coming in, I'll set up my GoPro and I'll video it. So that way they have it so that way they don't have to come back and shamefully say, hey, will you teach me through meditation, Yogi Jesse. I'll do it in that form and I'll take like stills out of it, stuff like that. But no, it's all, the meditation aspect reaches across, way past the physical. It sets the conditions for the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And so adding that into the physical aspect, I think helps increase the impact of the workouts that I do because my mind's right. And yoga stands for, translated from Sanskrit, is unity of the mind, body, and spirit. So if you're going to put that level of emphasis into a physical workout, why would you not want those things synced as well? And it's all about effectiveness, for me, and efficiency. And if I can slow things down while everybody else is running, tripping over each other, I can move out of the way and avoid a lot of those chaos moments.
Sure. And I know I've tried meditation as well, and it's such a discipline thing. I do have trouble doing the sitting still, and I can do the movements fine and things like that. But I found that journaling in the morning is something that I'm a big fan of to help me not only plan out the day, but look at future goals I might
You're
may
setting
have
intentions.
goal for
It's
the day.
the same. It's a form of meditation. Now
Sure.
that you're not doing it, it's just meditation is different for you,
Yeah.
and you're still doing it though. You're setting the intention, and spot on. We're talking the same language.
Do you do any journaling or no?
I do, yes. I mean, I'm actually not a writer. I hate writing, or I did hate writing. I'm a math guy, and so the writing thing was kind of more of an obligation to get the story out about my 14 guys that died overseas, and several more that died of suicide since. So that was more of an obligation thing. But then I realized very quickly that it was therapeutic and all that stuff. And so I will journal after my morning meditation, and I will put down my to-be list rather than a to-do list, and all the things that I want to focus on and to be. And I always do that on paper. And in fact, journal's downstairs, but this awesome guy, McCord Rees out of Salt Lake City, made me this journal that has my Phoenix logo on the front of it. And I do that. I'll send you a picture of it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, that is cool.
And we're actually going to leather wrap the first 100 copies of the Phoenix Project with his leather, and that it's gonna be neat. But I do it in that journal, and I write it down, and then I also at the end of each day I will write down a fears list, like fears and resentments essentially. And what I'll do is I write down all the things I'm afraid of and all the people that I'm pissed off at or whatever. And I'll write those down. Let's say there's 9 of them on there, 9 things. Well, that's depressing, right before you go to bed. And then right next to that, I'll write down my gratitude list. And I will not stop on that gratitude list until I'm at least +1 past the number of fears and resentments that are on there. And what that does is that shows me tangibly with evidence in front of me before I go to bed, I have a lot more to be grateful for than I have to be pissed off about. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, big fan of the journaling aspect. That is something I do enjoy and I've come to enjoy, but it's different type of meditation. But
Sure. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about your story now. So,
Cliff Notes version.
What's that?
Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, Cliff Notes version. So you've had lots of family that fighting in the military has been part of your heritage throughout your entire life. And prior to 9/11, you were interested in joining the military. But then September 11th, 2001 has been a day that has affected so many families in so many different ways. And you actually were there beforehand eating breakfast. And I was wondering if you could have a little conversation with me talking about how that day impacted your decision that, yes, 100%, I need to go overseas and serve my country.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that impacted the decision to serve. So it wasn't really a decision. I had no choice. If I wanted to go to college, I had to go the military route. So yes, my family has served since before the United States was the United States. I have a great granddaddy times 6 or 7 that was one of Rogers Rangers during the French Indian War, because our family had come here from England in the Scotland, the 1600s, when Queen Mary was removed and beheaded. The House of Stewarts was no longer welcome. And so we all came over here to the colonies and settled to escape persecution. And we're some of the original people in the Carolinas when we landed. And so when the French Indian War popped up, my family was some of those Rogers Rangers that were made famous by the movie Patriot of Mel Gibson. And I actually have the hatchet that relative used downstairs on display. So it's been definitely a legacy type thing. It's all been Army until my dad. My granddaddy was World War II, Vietnam, or Korea, first part of Vietnam era Ranger. And then my dad revolted, went in the Navy. So he did 31 years in the Navy, and then I ended up following my grandfather's route. But growing up, we did not have a lot of resources, and so college, no one in my family had gone to that point. So if I wanted to go, it was going to have to be through some sort of military system. I did play baseball, and I was decent at it. The opportunity to go to West Point was because of baseball. It's not because of academics. At the time, it was a little easier to get in as an athlete. And so that was the plan, because you go to West Point, if you get drafted in a certain round, you can go play, and you're a recruiter. Like David Robinson's probably the most famous athlete that's pulled it off from Annapolis Naval Academy, basketball player. So that was the plan. So I went there, or was going there, and then my mother got sick. And so they had me go to the University of Washington for 1 year to see what happened. And I ended up staying, gave up baseball. It was a tough decision, but University of Washington was a great school. I needed to be there for my family. And of course, if I would have gone back to West Point, I would have had to start over as a freshman with all those guys that I started with. And it wasn't going to work out. And so I was advised to stay there. I went. Of course, if I would have gone back to West Point, I would have got commissioned in 2003, not 2002. So fast forward to start of my senior year, everybody back then wanted to be a Ranger. They say that, like, Ranger, because that's the cool thing to do. And University of Washington's just north of Fort Lewis, Washington, which is where 2nd Ranger Battalion is. So all of our instructors were guys that were coming from there to take a break. And so, like, the standard that I had modeled for me, which is not normal. Usually the ROTC is, it's a retirement place for guys to go. But I had some incredible instructors, and also had one, Nelson De Leon, which I believe has passed away. Had come from Ranger School. And so, he kind of gave me the best he could to help me prepare for that crucible in my life, which I will still say at this point, the only things that have been hard since then have been losing guys and losing friends to death. Other than that, Ranger School set a new standard for me that has made everything in life manageable since then. So the plan was, I always wanted to do it because that's kind of that was the thing, and that was the cool thing to do. And so I finished the officer candidate school for ROTC cadets, and then got a chance to go hang out with the 82nd Airborne Division for a month as a cadet. I'd gone to airborne school as a freshman because I was the only one that could pass the PD test for my program to get into it. And so I was airborne qualified. So I showed up there, and as a cadet, remember, I'm not in the Army yet. I'm still a civilian, technically, I guess, in the reserves. Go there with them. First day, they're like, "All right, cadet, you're going to jump with us." I'm like, "Roger that. I'm motivated. Let's get after it." So your first jump back into any airborne unit, Rangers, 82nd, whatever, it's supposed to be a Hollywood jump where you just jump with a parachute, no equipment. So you can kind of like get your airborne legs back under you. And it's a CYA thing in case someone gets hurt, whatever. Because it just seems like every time someone jumps with equipment, their first jump back, they land right on the equipment and break a hip. And I had known brigade commanders that were on track to be generals that lost that general star because they got hurt on that first jump back and they didn't adhere to the guidance. So that's the bottom line. Well, I didn't know that as a cadet. So the lieutenant that was in charge of me, the West Pointer, was not a fan of me. That he had to babysit, gave me this like 120-pound ruck to jump. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I go out the plane as the last guy to jump out, and 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, no shock of a parachute. Like 5,000, 6,000, nothing. 6th jump, had a malfunction. Popped my reserve. I was the first one to hit the ground, and I was the last one to jump out. They all come up to me. Holy crap, they see that I'm a cadet. They're like, "Oh no, we almost killed a cadet." Of course, I was jumping combat equipment. And let's just say that I don't remember what I jumped that day, at least. And then I got to do whatever I wanted for the next 4 weeks. And then was fortunate enough that when I did want to go infantry and get a Ranger School slot, those guys remembered me back there. So I did that. So after that, it was about to start my senior year, beginning of September. And my family, the closest family member is an uncle and an aunt in New York City that passed away that were actors. And I'd known him since I was, 3 or 4 years old, and I just always admired him. He was definitely the outlier of the family from a strong religious Catholic upbringing. He was the frou-frou actor out there, and I would come out and visit him whenever I could. And he said, "Hey, Jesse, we want to take you out to New York, take you to some plays, kind of treat you to one last civilian vacation before you get commissioned and go serve our country for 4 years, go back and crush it in the civilian world." All right, so I go out there. Had just a blast. I mean, backstage at Broadway plays that he was involved in. And the one thing we had not done yet, of all the times I got out there, was go to the World Trade Center. And I'm like, hey, I'd love to go eat at the top of the World Trade Center, that restaurant that's up there. And so they make the reservation. And the only one they could get was for right before I flew out on September 10th. And so we went up there, had brunch September 10th, went back down, got on the plane, went back to the University of Washington, got up early, was down in the gym. And just after 5 a.m., I watched those same towers I'd just been in go down. And at that point, like, I wanted to go infantry, but if I wouldn't have gotten it, it would I would have been able to survive and whatever. But after that, it was like I knew I had no shoes. Like, I needed to go. They went after my family as far as I was concerned. Right. And so that was what solidified the desire to pursue the infantry and the Ranger route, and what I ended up doing, which ultimately only led to me getting retired after 10 years and one day. But that was what motivated it. It was always kind of there, but that solidified it. Plus, too, we had 50 guys in my class. All 50 of them wanted to go infantry and be a Ranger. After 9/11, there were 3 of us. Once it became real,
yeah,
the number of people that wanted to do it definitely dwindled down. But yeah, got commissioned as part of the first commissioning class after 9/11, and it was game on. And I left 2 days before my graduation, didn't stay for it, went to the basic course, went to Ranger School, and was on the first thing smoking, because I spoke Arabic in early 2003, and started a deployment process that was nonstop until 2010.
So when you were in your training, and then when you were deployed overseas, you've talked about having a dark horse mentality, where you've kind of been the guy who grinds and maybe doesn't have all the advantages that other people have, and it's important to stay humble and stay grounded, but be the dark horse. How did you carry that mentality into your training and whenever you were serving overseas?
Yeah, so just to recall that, the dark horse mentality, some people don't know what that means, is the dark horse in horse betting is that horse that is not even on the radar tracker for when people do their research and stuff. Is the horse that's 1 out of 100 chance of winning. You put $5 on it and he ends up pulling it off. I mean, you're walking away with a couple $1,000. And it's a term more used in England, and it's a British SAS term for somebody coming up that wasn't from the higher level of society. And so the dark horse is the one that no one knows about, no one cares about, no one's worried about him doing anything. So he can kind of hang with the pack, maybe hang back a little bit and just not be noticed. And he conserves his energy, keeps his head down, and then that last 10% of the race, while everyone else is tired from talking about how great they are, just blows through. And so I realized as a ROTC cadet, when I went to officer basic course, which is the first thing you do after you graduate, they call it something different now, but you do that and then you go to Ranger School, or you get a chance to go to Ranger School. So I went to the very first class available, which was all the West Pointers. So I was the only ROTC cadet there. So it was, however many hundreds of West Pointer guys, me, and one Air Force Academy graduate, who is I consider to be my best friend now, and his father is the COO of AM300 Solutions, and is who I consider to be the catalyst of the Phoenix Project. He would actually probably be a much more interesting interview than me, because he's got the inside story. But Ryan Bell was an Air Force Academy graduate. So the only reason why him and I connected was our mutual hatred of everybody else, because they all hated him because he wasn't at West Point. He turned out he's colorblind, and they found that out right before he got commissioned, so he couldn't fly, and he was able to trade his commission to be an infantry officer And but other than him, I mean, it was me against the world. And what I probably should have done was keep my head down and just kind of be quiet and try and survive in that environment. But instead, I looked for paths to. I had to find creative paths in order to compete against these guys. And for 4 years, they had lived the military life. Me as a cadet, I was in college. It was like we were playing Army once a week type of thing. Those guys lived it, so I had no advantages. And so I realized very quickly I had to get creative in order to just compete with them. And once I realized that I could compete with them, it's like, well, I got to try and see how hard this can be pushed. And so did well there and got an opportunity to go to Ranger School right away, passed the first time through. And when I showed up to my unit, I was the only non-West Point guy. So kind of became a pattern of being the only one. And it'd been something that had kind of been consistent through my life too, because I'd gone to 10 different schools from kindergarten to ninth grade. Yeah.
Oh,
and so everywhere I went, I was always this new guy. I was always having to reestablish myself and fight for position only to lose it the next year. And so you have to learn creative ways in order to make up for that advantage. And so it just perpetuated things as it continued on, but ended up learning to use it for success. And now I codified it and call it that, dark horse mentality type thing. Yeah.
Sure. And when you were deployed, what would a typical day, I know every day is different, but what would a typical day look like for you in terms of daily routine? Were you try to stick to a routine, or was everything so hectic and chaos that it was very difficult to try to stick to one?
Yeah, so it was deployment dependent, depending on when we were over there, what the mission was, all that. There were times where we worked on reverse cycle, so we were always out at night. We did everything at night. We would, if we knew we were doing that, we'd train for that when we were back here in the States, because we do everything under night vision for the most part. And so it just makes sense. And so when you're on that reverse cycle like that, in that scenario, you do all your missions at night, you sleep for a few hours when you get back, you go hit the gym if you can, and then you're doing intelligence preparation for the next mission, or targeting, that we call it intelligence targeting. And so the cycle is generally that for that type of deployment. There were deployments that I went on where, we were there to, advise Iraqi special operations guys, where we would, help them do, the similar thing. But mainly focused on targeting, because everybody wants to do the sexy raid, right? Go blow down the doors, come in on the helicopters, but you got to build the target packets to get there. And at first we kind of were like, the emphasis was all on the raids, not targeting process. Well, how do you get targeting information? How do you get intelligence? Well, CIA is not going to give it to you. Reports from random people at random agencies in the United States are probably not, so you got to get out there. And so we realized then that, hey, we needed to actually be out with the population in order to see what's going on, understand, gain their trust. And so then it evolved to this like 24-hour-a-day thing. And there was it was everything. If mission came up, if the intelligence drove the mission, you had to go where the intelligence drove you. And so it became, there's no opportunity for any sort of schedule or cycle or anything like that. I tried to set one as much as I could, because you need to have some semblance or control of the chaos, or at least perception that you have it. But in those type of situations and scenarios, it's hard to do that.
Sure. And when you talked about just then about going out in the population to gather information, intel, what would be an example of that? How would you do that?
Okay, so an example would be that. All right, so one of the big things is we always want to rebuild countries after we take them down, right? So but that's the last thing any of us want to do. None of us we didn't join the Army to build hospitals and hand out blankets and soccer balls. We did it to do raids. Well, so the challenge as a commander is, how do you motivate your soldiers and your Rangers to do this stuff, the missions that no one wants to do? Well, being able to show them, hey, if we go out there and do this, the population is going to trust us. They're going to start talking to us. It's not about winning them over and being nice guys. It's about developing the relationship so we can get the information before the enemy does. Because if we don't win them over, the enemy is going to do it. And so I didn't want to do it either at first. But then when I realized the impact that I was actually making, I was just communicating with one of my interpreters that I had, that we just got his visa approved, where he served under me for 6 months. And he's been hiding because they're targeting guys like that left and right in Iraq and Afghanistan. And like, he's finally coming here to the United States. And so like 15 years later, I mean, I still have relationships with people because of those things I did. And I realized very quickly the impact of the things that I was doing. And it also gave me more missions because the people trusted me. They realized, okay, we want more of this. And the only way we can get more of that is if they get rid of them, and they'll do more stuff and come back out in the community if we feed this. So it starts this cycle where for the first time I realized maybe being of service to people and coming in with an intention of service in the first place is actually the cycle that we need here in order to win. And I didn't realize that until about 2007. I think that we learned that. And I mean, the rest of the Army did without question towards 2008, 2009, but it was too late and order to do. But if we had understood that 2003, 2004, I think Iraq would have been done in 5 or 6 years. But in terms of the other stuff, Unwinnable Wars, the reason why I wrote this book is, we thought we were recreating, like creating the wheel there in terms of counterinsurgency in 2006, 2007. Well, this book was a research project after I left company command when I did a fellowship in 2010 to 2012, that I found that U.S. Special Operations, Special Forces in Vietnam actually perfected all of this stuff. And all those lessons learned were thrown out with the bathwater, the Vietnam War, to be forgotten for 35 years until I went over to interview some British SAS guys in England. Said, hey, give us a secret sauce. Like, dude, go back and look at your own history, man. And they were the ones that told me and helped me find a couple of these guys, and ended up realizing that the information that those guys had, and it was in this book, had I had this, I probably wouldn't have lost any of the 14 guys that I lost in 2007. Because that's what it's about. It's the original title of this when it was in the master's form was Controlling the Population. It's not necessarily about controlling them to like have them as slaves. It's about controlling the conditions on the battlefield, guiding the population, etc. And that's what that book is about. And I use it as a lens when I published it to not forget the lessons learned from COVID, because the consequences, because Unwinnable Wars, Finding Victory in the Ashes of Defeat, this book came out of the ashes of defeat of the Vietnam War. But it was some of the most incredible information that how we had it, it would change Iraq and Afghanistan. So, so for further reading, if you want to know more about the answer to that question, feel free to order Unwinnable Wars from Amazon.com or am300.com. So, but the main takeaway of the whole thing was this realization that, okay, being the killer or the guy going out to kill terrorists is not necessarily what's going to win. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, we want to win. All Americans want to win, right? At least I hope so. The mission statement of my company is to develop, collaborate, and deliver hard-fought wisdom to what? Not to sit around and be a yogi all day, not to be a nicer guy, not to be more still. It's to win. It is to win across the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual planes of existence or life. Like when I work with these athletes, it's not about them becoming better people and them becoming examples. It's a byproduct of the process, as is the podiums, the Olympics, trophies, all that stuff. And during that time in 2007, when that shift happened, I realized, and that was what ended up kind of guiding my recovery, realizing, hey, if I come in with an intention of being of service in every situation that I go into, then I'm going to be able to help someone out, and it's going to lead to more opportunities. And then it gives me a level of accountability that people are not watching me, and I have more incentive to do the next right thing. So in a nutshell, that was kind of like all the lessons learned from those combat deployments. But yeah, there's no rhyme or reason. I mean, SEALs had it different. The Marine Force Recon had it different. Delta had it different. It just depends on the mission that you're given at any time. If your mission is direct action, DA, then you're probably going to only be working at night under nods. If your mission is counterinsurgency, you got to be out there with the population. Right. And for us, it was direct action, but I didn't have the patience to wait around for intel to come to me. And so I needed to go find it. And turned out that was more effective in terms of keeping my boys busy, of them wanting to do. And then obviously finding the real key to victory in situations like that. Ultimately being of service.
Absolutely. And you were for service for so many years, but then you had to medically retire because of knee pain and knee injuries that you had. Could you talk to me about how that came about?
again, probably a 2-hour long podcast just to go through that. But so the jumps, obviously a big deal. I had 3 malfunctions during my military career. And then just jumping as many times as I did, that has the impact. But the injuries that were key, and this definitely plays into my process and why I do things the way I do, and it's important, I suppose. So in 2003, right at the beginning of our deployment, I got over there, I think 2 weeks in, we were going out. So no one had really died at this point. Like Iraq was pretty easy on the initial parts. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it wasn't the bloodbath that we were expecting in terms of casualties. And I believe in my division, 22,000 people in the 82nd Airborne Division, I was the first casualty as a lieutenant. Yeah. So I just graduated from Ranger School, went over to Iraq, and we were going on a raid. And I was on the back of a Humvee before we had up armored Humvees. And so we had sandbags on the bottom to protect us. And then we had tow straps on the back to keep us from falling out. Well, normally as a commander or the platoon leader, I'd be riding in the front as the truck commander, but I was dismounting with the lead assault squad. And so I was in the back with them. We're going over a bridge. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden, RPG comes out of nowhere and nicks the side of the Humvee on the bridge. Driver swerves. Bridge gives out. Vehicle starts going down. Everyone jumped over the sides. I went to follow, and my stomach got caught by the tow strap, and I went down with the vehicle. The vehicle flipped on top of me, and I was stuck under there with thousands of pounds of sandbags on top of me. And I fought it out for maybe 30, 45 seconds and realized, holy crap, all this training and I'm going to die in a sewage canal. And I took in a big gulp of water, well, poo water, essentially, and went into a state of asphyxiation, and everything went silent. Saw a bright light, thought about 3 things. I was never going to see my wife again, the mother of my 2 daughters. I was never going to have kids. I was only 23 at the time. And I was never going to be able to play Pinehurst No. 2 golf course, the famous golf course right outside of Fort Bragg. And then everything went dark and thought I'd died. And a week later, I woke up in a hospital in Baghdad. I had my night vision goggles on, so they went straight back in my eye sockets. So I had double hematoma. Both eyes were swollen shut. So when I woke up, so I was an engineering major in college, but I also majored in international relations, focus on the Middle East, which is where the Arabic came from. And so I had a working knowledge of Islamic culture, Middle East, enough to be dangerous. And so when I woke up and all I saw was bright lights and hearing a bunch of female voices around me, first thing I said, no kidding, was, holy crap, there might be something to this whole Islamic divergence thing. For being a martyr, am I a martyr? And the head nurse was a girl named Jen McNamara, who's the wife of one of my platoon leader buddies. And they assigned her so that she could report back to my unit how I was doing. And she's like, Jesse, you jackwagon. He goes, you're alive. You're in Baghdad. I'm like, Jen? Goes, yes. And I said, oh gosh, I'm in hell. And so I woke up, and that was what my reentry. And I have actually run into 5 of those nurses since I retired, like just randomly in places since then. They all remember me as that lieutenant that thought he was in heaven, Islamic heaven. And so woke up, I was out for a week, woke up 24 hours later, went back out to the fight when I could open my eyes again. Obviously there was probably some traumatic brain injury that occurred. I was underwater. The medics on the ground said I was there for just under 4 minutes. They revived me on the helicopter on the way back. My daughter's mother will probably tell you I have some brain damage from that, but I went back out to the fight. And that was the dumbest thing, obviously, I could have done, but we didn't know any better back then. And I obviously wanted to get back with my boys. And when I got back to them, I mean, this is the beginning of the war, so we don't have to meet. They're like, holy crap, sir, you're alive. We all assumed you were dead. And I said, nope, I'm back. And let's get after it. And so went right back into the fight. Never really processed it, the fact that I had come that close to death again. So that happened. And obviously there was some probably repercussions on that, but I was 23, I was young, and we're in the middle of war, so that took it away. Then the next major time, leaving out smaller instances, fast forward to 2007, March 2007, I would just taken command, been in command for about a month of Charlie Troop, Task Force 300, was 26 years old, so was the youngest commander in theater by a couple of years. So way out of my element, way out of my league. And we had just done our first big successful mission in the Diyala River Valley, which is where ISIS ended up being. It was ISI at the time, because they weren't in Syria yet. And we established a stronghold in the town, and we were doing well. We were about to push north, and the day before we were about to push north, suicide bomber came right up to the front of our base, claiming needing medical attention. Tried to help them out, and as soon as they got in, I didn't see them come in, but I was just coming out of my little command hooch. And right as I opened the door, I saw Ben Saban, our senior medic, yell, "Get down, get down, get down." And I turned at the last second, and he came like right in between me and the suicide bomber. And so I would have gotten peppered all down the front and then cut the Swiss cheese. Instead, I took 19 pieces of shrapnel from the top of my head all the way down below my knee. And that was all that I got hit. Still blew me back, knocked me the heck out. Woke up 5 seconds later, just covered in blood. And unfortunately, Ben was killed. And he died protecting me. And so that was my first casualty. It was about 4 or 5 hours before I could get off the battlefield to get all the shrapnel taken out. Because we had, Ben had died, and we had 18 other guys that were wounded more seriously. And so I went back to the closest base, got it taken out, didn't take any pain medication, went right back out to the fight 3 hours after I got there. Once again, no processing, no nothing, just get back out there. And so that was the incident that kind of started the downfall. There was one other time that I was wounded after that. But I came back from that deployment and probably only nicked something in my knee when the suicide bomber hit, that after 9 more months of fighting on it and no MRIs available, the time I got back, I had to have ACL, MCL, PCL, meniscus surgery. And so had that one deployed a few months after that. Probably shouldn't have done that. Had another surgery right after that deployment, did one more deployment, another surgery. And then the fourth surgery was right before I was supposed to go back to Iraq as General Bob Caslin's aide. And they wanted to just check on it, and they had to do it again. And so the lesson learned there is when you need to rest, none of us are Superman. Do what you need to do in order to fully recover. Because who knows how much risk I put my guys in by me not being as fast as they expected me to be, by me not being truthful about where I was physically. Thankfully, no guys were killed from my unit or even wounded after the first surgery, but that's what ended up taking me down. And so those are the wounds. And then obviously the wounds that I did not talk about, which are way more important, is the wounds that I got from losing Ben, losing 9 guys in one day, 2 weeks after I lost Ben, and then losing 4 more guys through the course of that deployment, and not being able to have the ability to talk to anybody about it or process it. And so when I retired, I did not initially have any sort of PTSD or TBI indications because I didn't want to lose my clearances going in the civilian world. And so I had those scars, and it wasn't until the Phoenix Project started in 2017 that I finally properly addressed them. And it's kind of the genesis of the Phoenix Project.
Sure. Wow, that was insane to hear about. And again, I think you're so courageous, the fact that you got injured and almost drowned, and the suicide bomber continuing to push, continuing to be mentally tough and go out there to serve your country. I think that's very respectable. And wow, that was amazing to hear about. But I think that when you're talking about the Phoenix Project and coming back in 2017, what is the Phoenix Project? And could you talk a little bit about how that came about?
Yes. So the Phoenix Project is okay. So I'll do my best to articulate this in a way that doesn't turn away too many people from reading my book or taking me seriously. So in March of 2017, so after I retired, I went into the civilian workforce. I was fortunate enough to have gotten 2 master's degrees somehow while I was in the midst of all those deployments. And so when I got out, I was pretty marketable. Youngest major in the Army, and youngest retired major in the Army, unexpectedly, and 2 master's degrees. And so I went in the civilian force and wanted to try and make my mark and be relevant and try and gain back that sense of purpose I had from being an Army Ranger. But also not getting help and using alcohol and other VA prescriptions in order to suppress the pain that I was feeling from that. So in 2016, started AM300, which was originally a tech company, developed a patent to track soldiers on the battlefield with a little RFID chip. They could be tracked from one central location. So basically, commander on the ground could have complete visualization of his entire soldiers. And it was doing well. I knew all the people in the Army who would be decision makers. And so as soon as that went public, and we got our first big contract, unfortunately, the divorce process started, and there was a lot of assets that were involved in that with, AM300. And so that process was long and expensive, and it broke me, because I'll tell you what, no one will tell you that probably they believed at the time, but my only priority, the only thing I really wanted to be good at, was a family. I'd watched 3 of them blow up in my face as a kid. I wanted to do that right. It was the main reason why I got married before I deployed, because let's be real, man. I did not expect to make it back from my first deployment. I don't think my new in-laws expected me to make it back either, which is probably the only reason why they supported the marriage, right? And because I wanted to marry her before I deployed, because the benefits that she would get. And so to lose my family was arguably the most traumatic thing that I had up to that point. And so but what it did was it forced my hand to take a look at what I needed to finally be able to do in order to work on healing myself. Otherwise, I would have eventually died from, the lifestyle that I was living, between the stress, the alcohol, and all that stuff. And so I'm obviously being guarded in case my daughters or anyone listens to this and that. We can have further conversation offline. But in March of 2017, divorce process finally ended after about a year. I was done and destroyed, but I knew I needed to figure out what was causing this pain with me and why all these guys were committing suicide. So in March of 2017, the number of suicides matched the number that we lost of guys I'd served with. And so I kind of did a little research on it. It turns out there was one commonality between all of them. One thing: they all had copious amounts of alcohol in their system when they did it. And so obviously there's no way to prove they're alcoholics or anything like that, but we all were, pretty much. And so I said, okay, these guys followed me into combat. These guys got to this level of drinking, most likely because of the things they did under my command. I had a role in leading them to this point. Not that I was responsible for it, because that's not healthy. But if I had a role in getting them there, maybe I can have a role in helping them come back. And so initially it was basically to try and stop the bleeding from all these suicides that I was experiencing. And so I knew that I needed to go do it their way. And so I fortunate enough to have good insurance. I could have gone to, somewhere nice and plush to remove alcohol from the system. So I knew I needed to remove alcohol first. And I did not realize how strong of a hold it had on me until I tried to do it. And so I decided to go to a VA recovery facility, and I went and researched and found the lowest rated one in the country, because I wanted to go where anyone would have access to, like, prove this model. And so I went to a VA, name which one. I get there, and they're like, "Hey, you're the first Army Ranger we've ever had. You're the highest ranking officer." And I'm like, I am here to work on myself. I am a vet, and that's it. And I haven't had a drink in 3 days, and I'm pissed off. And so they locked me in a room by myself while they were waiting for my in-processing counselor to take me. And so I was sitting in there, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I made a mistake. I am essentially locked up right now, like a prisoner. But I had volunteered for it, so I had no choice. And so I sat there, and there's a whiteboard in front of me and markers. And so I started writing down. I'm like, okay, like, what are things that have worked before in my life? And so I kind of started like wargaming and all that. And I thought about when I would go speak to the athletes at US Ski and Snowboard, which started back in 2014, I'd go out to the rookie camps. I would talk about this idea of resilience, this idea that, hey, if you are strong on the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual planes of existence, if you get injured, like, you'll have a better chance at bouncing back. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I primarily live life on the physical plane of existence. So when that was taken away from me, that was the only leg on that 4-legged stool of life that was holding me up. It's crushing. And so I would go out and preach this to these athletes, but wasn't living it. And so I wrote that down as a start. And then I started realizing, okay, mental way, like therapy. All right, I don't like being told what to do, especially by a civilian. And so a civilian therapist telling me how to recover is probably not going to work, but it might help. So I wrote down like therapy, whatever. Okay, TRICARE therapy, civilian therapy, VA therapy. On the emotional plane, I said, okay, what are my resources on the emotional plane? Physical plane, I said, okay, I'm CrossFit level 2 certified instructor. I'm a Jim Jones guy. I've got all this stuff for the physical. All right, got that. And then spiritual, I had my own path at that point, which for me, my path was, Christianity. And so I was writing down all these things and filling up the board. And suddenly I realized, holy crap, like I might have all the things that I need in order to like to not fight the VA way or the mental way, or not fight the emotional way, not fight the physical, the church way or spiritual way, but learn to use those things to augment my system. And so I wrote for 2.5 hours, and that whiteboard was full, man. And I was like sitting like this, I'm like, wow, that is impressive. And I was holding up my hand because it was one big white space under the emotional plane of existence. I could not write a single thing because I had perfected the art even before I was in the military of emotionally closing myself off, because that was the way I had to protect myself. And it was the only way I knew to protect myself. And that goes back to a stepdad that made Ranger School a little bit easier for me when I got there. And so for me, if someone was bigger than me, what's the best way to protect yourself? Create a bubble, isolate, protect before they can get to you in the first place. And so I started early and then just kind of manifested. And then when I got out of the military, I didn't trust anybody because they hadn't been through what I've been through. And so that isolation continued. And I thought in many ways, like, hey, I don't want to be a burden to anybody. So if I just stay away, like I never drank in public. No one ever saw me drink in public. I always drink in my office at home because I wanted to be by myself. And so on the emotional plane of existence, I could literally not write down anything. Just gone through divorce, all this stuff. And so I sat there and I was like, well, the only thing that I hate more than alcohol or PTSD is white space on a calendar or a whiteboard. So I got to write something. And so I was having this conversation with the board and I'm like, what can I write down? And so I'm like, all right, I remember some guy complaining about how we're going to have to go to AA meetings or NA meetings every night while we're here. But at least it'll get us out of the hospital and get some fresh air. And maybe I can just like offer to be someone to talk to someone each night, one person. That's it. Every night, and just be there for them. And that can satisfy this emotional plane of existence for now until I figure it out. And so I wrote down on the board 12-step groups. And at that point, I was not a fan at all of that. That was my anti-emotion, why the emotional plane wasn't going to work with me. Because if I went to 12-step groups, I'd have to be around people. They would tell me what to do. It wasn't going to happen. And so I wrote down 12-step groups. And when I did that, I had what can only be described, and I'd never done LSD or mushrooms or anything. So I never hallucinated other than at Ranger School when after I lost 51 pounds over the course of 61 days and was having conversations with trees in Florida. But I all of a sudden watched that board come alive and clearer than a 4K ultra high definition TV. And I saw a phoenix bird rise up in front of me. And I knew what the phoenix bird was because I had to take a class on Greek mythology. And I remembered it was this Greek bird that would, it would rise up in its life. And when it reached its culmination of life, it would burn down to the ground in the ashes. And then out of the ashes of good would come a better version. And then it would live its life and then repeat this cycle until it reached ultimate perfection. And I was always kind of like, I appreciated the story because it said, hey, yeah, death is bad, ashes are bad, but if you can figure out a way to leave the bad behind and evolve new, it appealed to me. I hadn't thought about it though since college. And so I'm saying, like, what is this? And then all of a sudden I start seeing all my successes in life, like a movie of myself, of, the sports accolades that I was able to achieve, getting into colleges that I never should have been able to get into, the promotions in the military, becoming a Ranger, all this stuff. And I'm watching it. And it was sort of the first time that I was actually like, you know what? I have an impressive resume that I am proud of. Like I've done some stuff that I'm proud of, despite the feelings that come out of a divorce and being doled from the judge and ex-wife and in-laws and all that stuff of what they thought. I was the first time got a chance to see what I had to be proud of. And so I kind of smiled. And then all of a sudden that phoenix bird came back up and blew the F up and engulfed all of those accolades, all of the things I was proud of, all the things that defined me. I was not Jesse Stewart. I was an Army Ranger. That was my entire identity, was wrapped up in this Army Ranger that happened to be named Jesse Stewart, that happened to have 2 beautiful girls, that happened to be married at the time. And everything was this. So when that was taken away from me, I was this shell of a person. And the only things that I had to be proud of all that, because everything that I'd done even after the military was only because of that service and that capacity. So everything was tied back to it. Take that away from me. I realized I was all of a sudden nothing. And I watched all that burn down to the ground. And for the first time in my life, I had never been depressed. Never been depressed. I think the last time I cried was 15 years old. And I was suddenly very sad and was hopeless for the first time ever. And I sat there and said, now what do I do? But then all of a sudden, those ashes started moving. And out of those ashes came a phoenix bird. It flew right up at me and like almost knocked me over. And I watched fly away.
Wow.
And right then was when the therapist came in and said, are you ready to play nice? And I realized I know what I need to do. Allow myself to burn down, not fight it. Allow myself to burn down, humble myself to those ashes, fight to get to those ashes so I can achieve my life purpose in order to come out of them. And so that's when the Phoenix Project started at a VA, the lowest rated recovery center in the United States, 0.4% success rate. And they stopped tracking after 6 months. So that might be a little bold. So that was where it started.
Wow.
And obviously, a lot of things happened after that. I realized very quickly that alcohol was not my problem. Alcohol was a symptom covering up a bigger problem. I thought it was maybe PTSD. Makes sense, given the things I had been through. I very quickly realized too that that wasn't necessarily the problem. Again, just a symptom. And it took me about 5 months to finally realize I'd gotten an opportunity to go up to this amazing facility up in Wyoming, run by the VA. It's a 60-day PTSD focused treatment, but you have to prove sobriety for a while. So I had to wait to go there. I went up there and got to hide and completely disconnect for 60 days up there in Wyoming. Beautiful country, God's country. And that was where I realized, because when you go in there, it's a process called cognitive processing therapy. So the idea is that you attack the thoughts and manage the thoughts before you get to the emotions and the behaviors that blah, blah, blah. And so when you go in there, you have to come in with your most destructive thought. And so maybe that thought is losing my best friend, losing my family, losing whatever. But as I thought about what my most destructive thought was, I realized my most destructive thought is that I am damaged and flawed beyond repair as a result of my military service. And I'm a shell of the person I am because of that. And that's because, my physical, why I couldn't do the things physically I could do more is because those wounds, my inability to, get help and address the PTSD led to, the marriage ending. And, obviously it takes two people on that, but I realized, holy crap, like I am here because of the thing that I held dearest to me and my identification. And so that was my thought. And I went in and I remember and also the therapist there was the only Ranger that qualified therapist in the entire VA. He's hiding up there. So I won't say his name to protect his hiding spot. But I went up there and I told him, I said, that's my thought. And he's like, okay, because I like it. He goes, it's going to suck, but I like it. I'm like, yep. So we went through it. And the idea is that you start with this one thought and you have all these emotions and feelings that are tied to it. And then through the process of 8 weeks, you learn how to reshape that thought. And reshaping that thought then gives new feelings. So where before it was sadness, depression, despair, blah, 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 and it's something different. And now there's feelings of hope, whatever. So I went in, it's damage and flawed thing. And so about halfway through, I realized my favorite painting or sculpture of all time is Michelangelo David statue. And the reason why that is I got to go see it in person on my honeymoon. My wife and I went to Rome, Italy for 1 week before I started Ranger School. And went there, and that was like the last civilian thing that I did for the next 8 years or 10 years. I remember seeing that statue and just thinking, and it is amazing. I mean, it's the depiction of the ideal man. But that piece of marble that originally came out of, and I knew this again from that art history class I took in college, my one fluff class that I got to take, the David statue was actually not supposed to be the David statue. It was supposed to be something much bigger and immense. And Michelangelo personally helped harvest the marble that was supposed to become this grand something else. When the emperor was inspecting it, they noticed a fault line across the marble. And the emperor said, okay, get that out of this palace. Not even worthy to be broken up and fill the grates in the marble. Get it out of here, destroy it. Never want to see it again. Michelangelo was like, well, I went through the effort to get this dang thing. So instead of destroying it, he hid it and he started working on it in private. And he didn't know what he was working on at first. He just started working around the damage and flaws of that piece of marble. And out of a damaged and flawed piece of rock became what we now know in history as the ideal man, and arguably the most famous sculpture of all time. So I realized, holy crap, what if me being damaged and flawed is all part of the purpose, so my creator can work around those damage and flaws to create what his purpose is for me. And when I realized that, I was like, holy crap, my most destructive thought is actually my Powerball ticket to my life purpose. And when I realized that, like, and I remember being there with, we'll call him Dr. Bob. When I told him this, he was even blown away, because no one had ever come into that program and had come in with the same thought and left with the same thought and successfully program. Like, it didn't happen. And so for me to reshape that, like, that was the game changer. And that was when I also realized that my problem wasn't alcohol. It wasn't PTSD. My problem was this capacity to be an a-hole that had been perfected and mastered in my career as an Army Ranger, and had survived me as a child and into college, but had no purpose when I got out. And so, and it led to just, this inability to function in regular life and not want people to be around me. And so here's the thing though, about that capacity. That is just simply an energy, right? An energy is not good nor bad. The nuclear bomb that blew up Japan, it's not bad. Nuclear energy can be used to power Japan for hundreds of years, that same bomb. So it's not, the energy is not bad. It's what we choose to do with it. So I was like, okay, I now realize that that's what is driving all this, is this capacity to, because destruction was the thing I was best at. That's what I was rewarded for. I did not get promoted 2 years early to major because handing out blankets and building hospitals. It was for the combat missions I did. It was for the Valorous Awards that are up there on that plaque. And so having to realize that the one thing that made me successful as a Ranger was the one thing that was killing me as a civilian. I was like, okay, got to fix this. And so when I was able to realize and isolate it as simply an energy, I said, well, if this is an energy that can be channeled to lead this unit of guys, do the things they did in the military, is it possible for it to be channeled in a different direction, potentially for good? Maybe even in service, the small things that I felt back in 2007 that we were actually winning the war, and direct that toward this unwinnable war for killing 22 of my friends every day on average, not as veterans that commit suicide. Mm-hmm. And so that's when the Phoenix Project kind of started getting traction. And something else happened while I was there, where US Ski and Snowboard needed some help with something. I was the only one that they could think of to possibly help them right before the Olympics. And I don't know how they found me, but they did. Luke Bonestein, the chief of sport, former Olympian himself, the guy that ran that place for 16 years, they called me, got a hold of me. I helped them out. It worked. And so, but that was right after this whole process. So as soon as I submitted that process, all these opportunities started coming up for me. And so helping in that process, and the irony of being locked up in a mental institution, essentially, and helping the world's largest NGB, national governing body, the Olympics, that gave me the opportunity to come speak at their partner summit after the Olympics, which then led to the TED Talk that I did, which then led to the book deal that I got, and officially codifying the consulting aspect that I do now. But yeah, that's how we get to here right now.
That's an unbelievable story about the Phoenix rising and burning and falling down, and then a new, better version coming up. That's completely changed your perspective, your mentality. And I have to think that this changed mentality is so beneficial to these athletes for the US Olympic snowboard team.
I hope so.
Well,
if anything, hopefully it's entertaining. Hopefully it's entertaining. The first time that I went there, man, here's the thing. They built a wheelchair ramp for me the first time I went there. Because if you Google, like, my disability rate total is like 340%. So with them, so doing this process, I mean, I was still in decent shape before that, but also since then, like, I've learned how to mitigate my injuries. I've learned how to build around them. And when I go there to the gym and hang with them on a workout, it's like, what the heck? This guy's like super disabled. How's he doing this? What's his secret type thing? And so that's where that is giving me the opportunity to, share that heartfelt wisdom. And then they come in to VAs with me and they see the impact of what they're doing, of giving veterans purpose and taking suicide off the table. And then they have veterans that are coming out to cheer them on. Well, all of a sudden they have more people out there and they realize, hey, I'm riding for something a little higher than myself here with all these guys with American flags. And that's how you get guys like Lucas Foster, who 3.5 years ago had never even been in a competition half pipe and was ranked 50th in the world out of the 50 pro riders. And all of a sudden is on his way to the Olympics.
Yeah. That's exciting. You have
that
the
dark horse mentality that
yeah.
I was just honored to be there and watch and offer some insight from an outsider's perspective and just help them with their processes a little bit. And in turn, they've taught me. I mean, that whole meditation thing didn't happen right away with the Phoenix Project. It was when I went out and snowboarded for the first time with them. And I realized that I'd been present for 5 minutes for the first time going down that mountain, scared to death that I was going to fall and everyone on the chairlift was going to see me as Lucas and JJ are doing backflips over me. So it is not me coaching them. It's this exchange, this development, collaboration, and delivering of heartfelt wisdom together, where somehow an 18-year-old kid can go into a VA with this 37 at the time year-old ranger and make an impact of thousands of vets in one single day. It's like, that's what the big thing is. And what's amazing, if you talk to Lucas, you'll make it sound like he cared less about winning an Olympic medal. I mean, he obviously does, but for him, it's about making an impact to people he meets. It's about changing lives. And man, I'm not saying I had anything to do with it. I think that was just his innate spirit, but it's been awesome to give him opportunities to let it manifest and grow. And offline, I'll talk to you more about, that type of stuff. But I am so excited to watch these Olympics coming up.
Yeah.
He finished as a top qualifier, or he finished as a top American this past weekend in the final Olympic qualifier.
That's right. Congratulations.
Nothing on the table.
And you, when's the Olympics scheduled for?
Next month. So they got, there's one more event in Switzerland this weekend. The Locks Open. It's the last event prior to kind of a tune-up. And then the Olympics, I think, start the first week of February.
How will I was going to say, how will preparations be different this last month coming up than previous preparation? Will anything be different because the Olympics are right around the corner, or no?
For the athletes?
Yes.
It's about the process, right? So they have a process, and the good ones don't change the process because they've been planning to go to the Olympics the whole time. And they're the ones that end up making the team. And so I wouldn't say anything changes. I think the big thing is just, is taking care of their body, making sure, I think the mental aspect is going to hold a lot higher because China's not our friend. They're going into a not super friendly country. I mean, I don't want to make China into more of an enemy than it is, but it's our adversary.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of super dynamic pressures on them that not athletes have had to deal with in a long time. I mean, I guess Russia maybe a little bit, but it wasn't nearly as, polarizing as China now. So, I know that there's a lot of, emphasis on protection of headspace. I mean, there's been discussion of boycotting Olympics, with politicians and stuff. And so it's just been a lot of noise. And I think the best ones are just trying to do everything they can to keep the Bose headphones on and silence it and do their process, focus on staying healthy, focus on not getting COVID.
Yeah.
I mean,
that would change it.
I mean, it would change everything. Exactly. And so, so now at this point, they'll all be in a bubble. So they'll do locks this weekend. And then after that, they'll all go into a bubble and they will have no contact with anybody other than the immediate coaching staff until they do their runs. Because that's the biggest risk is the IOC is super, and the US Olympic Committee, they're super, super strict on that. And, our visits that we've done and engagements with the team have been much, much more limited because of that, fear. Because if I want to go in and work with them, I got to go into a bubble. I don't have time to sit around, for whatever the time period is to wait. Last year was 14 days at one time, and it's just not feasible. So, but for them, I'd love to try and connect you with some of those guys so that way you can ask that question of them. But I think the good ones, they're assuming that they were already going to be there since they were 3 years old. So nothing has changed. They're going to do their same process. The ones that don't think that are the ones spazzing out, freaking out, racing to try and make that last spot, like that coach, and they're not going to make it because they're going to slip up and fall. So I think they're trusting their process and they're staying committed to it. and they're believing in it and not trying to go for the gimmicks to get the, last minute edge or anything like that. It's about controlling the things that they can control in their environment and executing what they know they can execute, not what they have to necessarily do to beat another guy that has a different set of skills. So that's what I believe the good ones. Well, they're all great. They're all good. But I think that's the ones that are going to be in contention for a medal are the ones that are doing that. And I can say the ones that I know personally are in fact doing that.
That's wonderful. Well,
trust the process, man. Excellence over success. Okay. Success is the podium. It's the medal. It's the trophy. It's the cheerleader girlfriend, right? Excellence is the little things every day that no one sees, that you don't get credit for, that no one wants to see on Instagram, that no one will like your post on Instagram. But it's those little things, like getting up at the right time every day, doing your stretches and your workouts, doing your cool downs, doing your meditations, nutrition, diet, all those things that no one sees. That's excellence. Well, excellence done over and over and over and over builds upon itself. And if you become an expert at the little things, all of a sudden the big things just become an automatic byproduct, like going to the bathroom in the morning every single day. The great ones, nothing's changed because their emphasis is on what little wing can I build up today and keep building on. And then when they get there, it's just another day. But that process, if done to their process, will just result in the natural byproduct of being what everybody else is chasing, success. Great ones, they don't care about the podium and trophy. That's a byproduct of the process, living a life of excellence. And that's what it's all about, man, is just becoming a master at the little things. Big things all of a sudden just become checkpoints in life.
Wow, that's great to hear about that, about reaching for excellence, whether you're an Olympian or just an average person every single day. Excellence is something attainable to shoot for every single day.
It is, but no one does it. Very few people will. So if you're one of the ones that does do it, you will skyrocket past. And I'll tell you, Lucas Foster is a perfect example of that. That kid is a Jedi master at the mundane. It's incredible to watch him.
Yeah. Jesse, one of the last things I like to do in my interviews is what I call 7 quick questions. There's 7 short answer questions, just to get to know you a little bit better. It can be related to what we talked about or not so much. Sound good?
Okay. Do you already know what the questions are? Or are you you're kind of randomly throwing them off?
Got them right.
Right. Okay. At least you have integrity. At least you have integrity.
What is your favorite movie?
Deadpool.
Deadpool. Oh my gosh. That's fantastic.
Yep.
Love it.
Deadpool. He was an Army Ranger. Army Ranger got kicked out because dishonorably discharged. But thing is special operations, anything we get caught doing, because we live in a little black box. I mean, there's a lot of things I probably should have been dishonorably discharged for. So he gets out to be a mercenary, and he doesn't say he wants to be of service to people, but ultimately, what does Deadpool do? He's going around helping people, right? Yeah. And so, and the other reason is Ryan Reynolds was never a tier 1 actor. He was the hottest guy in the world, or on People magazine or whatever, took over for Hugh Jackman and led to their little battle that goes on. But he was never tier 1 until they turned his face into an avocado and put a mask on him. Finally hit it big.
Yeah.
What the WTF? Yeah. So Deadpool, hands down. I can relate to that on so many different levels, and it explains a lot about us from special operations.
All right. So what are some of when you're not working, what are some of your favorite hobbies? What do you enjoy doing?
Arts and crafts. That is actually kind of true. I mean, like building the golf clubs, but I build them for people. Like I've just got done building a set for some kids that are super good golfers, but their parents aren't ready to invest in the clubs they need. And so I like to build. I mean, it's about the process. I don't need to build golf clubs, but I've fallen in love with the process. In turn, I do play golf. I like it. I've only been playing for 2.5 years, but it's something that I will never stop growing at. And every single day, there's a better version of me waiting the next day. And so I like golf, and it's an opportunity to compete every single time. And I love to compete. So golf, working out, hot yoga, I will say, that is a smoker. Especially if you do it right. And then again, that's something I'm never going to be the best at. I go in any hot yoga studio, there's always going to be 19 women in there. They're going to clean my clock no matter what. No matter how hard I work, I will never get the full expression of dancer. Not going to happen. So I have to be okay with it. every single time. It's a challenge. So
what is one inspirational person maybe that you view as a mentor that you look up to?
Well, that's easy. I'll label off two of them. Richard Bell, the guy I had briefly mentioned earlier. He is the catalyst for the Phoenix Project. Like, he was the initial investor in that, in more ways than like financial. And then Bob Caslin, General Bob Caslin. There is a amazing man. If he ever ran for president of the United States, I would drop doing everything I was doing to go volunteer and help him. He is beyond reproach. He's incredible. In fact, he's the one that taught me the excellence over success thing. When he went to become the superintendent of West Point, he's going to retire after his third 3-star position.
Wow.
He went over there and President Obama told him, your job, General Caslin, is to figure out how to beat Navy, because they had lost 14 straight years in a row. And he went on to rebuild that football team, and they won 3 years while he was there. First time in history that's happened. So So he's also the former president of the University of South Carolina, first general officer to ever be president or chancellor of a public university like that. So he's actually retired down to Florida now. So next time I go down and visit him, let's see if we can figure out a way to go link in and get a workout in.
Where's he at in Florida?
Classified.
Okay. I was just asking. I'm actually in South Florida right now. That's where I'm at. So I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's got a retirement home down there, but I want to respect his
I understand. Well, that's a great place to be for retirement.
Yeah. But anything that he has written, I would highly recommend watching. There's on my YouTube channel, the very, very bottom, my very first interview that I ever did was with him. He's also the godfather of my youngest daughter. And we talked about the West Point process, how he did that and built that. And it was his first interview after retiring from the military. So, and it's awesome. He motivates the heck out of me, man. And guy every single day still gets after in the gym. Fittest 67, 68-year-old I've ever met. And just, if he had to go back to Ranger School today, he would be honor graduate. He's the man.
Wow. What are some of your favorite books to read?
Favorite books to read: The Obstacle is the Way, by Ryan Holiday. It's a book about stoicism. Stillness is Key, another book about stoicism. Obviously, Stoic philosophy is not about being devoid of emotions. It's about learning how to master your emotions. Book The Obstacle is the Way, and I quote it in the introduction to my, not introduction, but the dedication of my book, where I say why I did it. And I said, this book is written for anyone, not just here in America, but for anyone willing to attack the obstacles and the way of life rather than spend all efforts avoiding them. Those obstacles provide opportunities for growth and the ability to creatively think our way out of difficult situations like COVID. As Ryan Holiday put it, the obstacle is the way. And so that book is awesome. It's a modern kind of hipster take on stoicism and kind of wraps up all the old philosophers and makes them relevant. So Obstacle of the Way is a good one. Stillness is Key. I'm trying to think of some good ones. I'll get back to you if you want to put it in the show notes later.
Sure. Yeah.
Think about. That's a deep one though. As someone that writes, like to ask me that's but I'll get back to you on that one too.
Okay.
But anything by Ryan Holiday, I recommend.
Okay. Gotcha. You and I were talking beforehand about Tom Brady, of all people, about his success and how, sometimes people hate him, but then you've got to turn to love him because you have to respect what he's done and how successful he is in the NFL. And the question I wanted to ask you was, who are some of your favorite athletes that you admire? And now I have to know, is Tom Brady one of them?
Yes, but not for the sports aspect.
Okay.
It'd be more for kind of the whole man aspect. Athletes I respect. Steve Nyman. So he's kind of the top men's U.S. downhill alpine skier. He was kind of the first. When I went and spoke at the Partner Summit, he was the only one there. I had the opportunity to work around professional sports for most of my life. So, when I was in high school, I had an opportunity to play with the Cleveland Indians Developmental League down in Florida. And so I was around a lot of baseball players in college, just being around the athlete stuff. And then we had a lot of guys from professional sports that came to work with us in the Army Rangers, Pat Tillman being the most famous one. So the novelty of athletes is different for me just because of my interactions that I've had in the past. And I've also been kind of had the veil pulled back, or I've seen behind it of how corrupt that world can be sometimes. So my view on athletes is a little different. So when I went at US Ski and Snowboard, I had an amazing opportunity to work around a lot of those guys and girls and respect the heck out of them as people. But I wouldn't say admire is a tough word to label on anyone, except for one. And 2008, Steve Nyman. That guy is physically the most impressive human being I've ever met in person. He's 6'5", 250, 3% body fat. He's like more ripped and bigger than Gronkowski is. And he's got a machine on him. His engine is, he will not quit. And I went up and worked out with him at his place in Jackson Hole in the off season one time. And he did the 300 workout with me for the first time. He'd never done it. I'd done it a few times, so I know what to expect. It sucks. Everyone almost dies. And that guy, though, would not quit. And he was the first person I'd ever seen try the workout blind and finish it. Now, he hurled out of his you-know-what, and his wife was teasing him afterwards for the first time after a workout, his wife said. But the fact that he beat me by 22 seconds in the workout. And at that point, I'd never lost one of those workouts to one of the athletes.
Really?
And so he was the first one. So when the team found out of that, I remember Luke Bonestein called me. He's like, Jesse, you only lost by 22 seconds to Steve? I'm like, only? Sounds like you're expecting me to get my butt kicked. He's like, well, Steve is the man. I admit he is. I mean, the guy is just, and the injuries he's come back from, he is the Tom Brady of Winter Olympic sports. He's 40. He's trying to become the first ever athlete to win an Olympic medal over 40 this year.
Wow.
He's just, his process, the amount of work that he puts into his craft is just inspiring. And he's super humble, and he's just the man. And you see him, I mean, he is more impressive than any professional football player or baseball player that I've seen in person. In person, he is that. And I've had the opportunity to just get my butt cleaned by him and workout after workout. It's awesome. So Steve Nyman, JJ Thomas, head half pipe coach. He was the last rider to keep Sean out of the Olympics in 2002, went on to win a medal, and he wrote the prologue in Un-Winnable Wars. But that guy, he stopped snowboarding after he won, and he came back to coach Sean. It's like, who does that? Yeah. And he's the Yoda master on them the slopes, and it's amazing to watch how much respect the other countries have of him. And he's Sean's coach. You'd think that Sean's coach would be like stay with it. He is the most chill, level-headed person I've ever met. He never gets excited. He constantly posts on Instagram whenever he has videos of him riding that he's preparing for the old man Olympics. I mean, he is. I wish I could somehow feel the state of peace that he at least presents with. So JJ, even though he's retired, I probably overall, just because he's the athlete, he's the coach, he's the mentor, he's the man of
does it all.
Even the Japanese, respect him. He's amazing. And then of course my current ones, Josh Bowman, US snowboarder, and Lucas Foster, US snowboarder. And Jason Woolley, US snowboarder. Like 2.5 years ago, I never been on snowboard. Now, I had an unhealthy lack of respect for fear to begin with. And on skis, I could get away with some pretty crazy stuff, but they finally got me on a snowboard 2.5 years ago. And if you go look at some of the videos that I have out there, it has been awesome riding with those guys. And if you saw me ride, you probably would not believe only 2.5 years, but riding with those guys, you have two options: either get better quick or die. And I'll tell you what, it's been awesome to be able to train next to them and keep up with them and see their process and their experience. And I went and rode with them up in Mammoth a couple weeks ago, or not Mammoth, Copper Mountain. And so I got my fix for the season because I probably wasn't going to see them until after the Olympics are over. But those are the three. And the reason why is because, none of them were projected to be on this stage a year ago. And they all have one thing in common. And that is they decided to be of service and give back to the veteran community, realizing it was an underserved community in terms of recognition before they'd even done anything really. And in turn, that is, they jumped higher in the ratings than anyone else, their peers. And so the fact that they were willing to take that route and buy into my suggestions and see that is, I have more respect than anything for them. And I'm so proud of them. It gets me to the point, if I could cry, I would cry when I think about their processes, because they're doing the same thing I did on the world stage, just they're doing it for peace rather than war. but the impact that they have the opportunity to have, way much bigger than mine. So, and that's legacy, dude. Like I posted on my Instagram the other day, like JJ and Lucas next to each other. And I said, hashtag legacy, as JJ had his arm around Lucas. And, it's like, oh man, it's going to be awesome, these Olympics, dude. And guess what? They're only 21. They're going to be around for a while. And they're both also, I don't think I'm supposed to say this, but probably better skateboarders than they are snowboarders.
Really?
So 2 more years, you may see them in the Summer Olympics. Oh yeah.
That would be cool.
They took me skateboarding for the first time when they came out here in March. It was interesting.
I did hear that. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you've gone and you've told your story and you spoke at all kinds of different locations. You've traveled. Where's your favorite place you've traveled to?
Home. Sanctuary. My favorite place to be. And home is not necessarily, here. It could be an Airbnb where my daughters come to be. But like the place that I have here, it is way nicer than what I need. Like it's way more than what I need. Like after my divorce process was over, I lived in some pretty Spartan conditions when my daughters weren't up here. But I realized the importance of sanctuary. Like you can be the baddest dude on the face of this earth, the most intense guy, whatever. If you don't have a place to go back and recharge and protect yourself and be vulnerable, like it's just not sustainable. And so for me, one of the emphasis of wherever I go, it's about establishing a sanctuary. And, when I go to visit my daughters, I mean, sometimes I'll stay in hotels if we have to, but I try to get an Airbnb that I can assimilate some sort of sanctuary for me and my daughters.
Sure.
And here, if you ever come out here to Texas, I'll invite you to the house. Yeah. It's like this place is set up like a museum almost, because it's my sanctuary. It's my safe place. It's where I can go and be proud, recharge, let my guard down, invite people in to bring them into my life that I used to do and show them tangibly how that's evolved into what they see out in public.
Sure.
And so I know that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but
no, it's heard it before as well.
It is true. And I'll tell you that I've been able to give some of my most compassionate, like of all the talks I've done stuff have been from the sanctuary and forced through Zoom because of COVID, stuff like that. And so sanctuary, but so I guess, anytime I can establish sanctuary, and if I don't do it, like it's become a lesson learned for me. If I don't do it, I'll suffer and pay the consequences. And so, yeah.
All right, Jesse, my last question is, I'm 23 years old, and I know that you advise, as we talked about, both your snowboarders are 21 right now. So my last question is, what advice would you give someone my age? You've learned all kinds of different life lessons throughout your entire life through mental toughness, having a great work ethic, being a team player, and even like we talked about the dark horse mentality. But what is one piece of advice you would give to someone my age?
So I will stay with this, and then we'll see how long we have to expand on it. It's right here. It says, Old Man's Club. Beware of the old man in a world where men die young. I wish that I had this humility when I was your age. Had I had that humility, I would still be in the Army and on track for, general officer at this point in my life. But I did not heed this. And I almost died in the process in order to get reset on the path that my creator had for me. So I'm not telling you to fear people like me or any of that stuff. I'm just saying, you live in a world, man, where people, the more successful you get, the harder people are going to try and break you down. The more good things that you do, the more bad people are going to try and squash those down because it highlights how bad they are or their deficiencies or character defects. Good people get attacked because they do the right thing, because light always exposes darkness. That is fact. Go into a room that's dark, turn on the light, always darkness leaves. So you live in a dangerous world in a lot of respects. And in order to survive through that world and maintain, the person you are and stuff, it's going to take something different. And so the advice that I would have given myself is that I'm super careful to ever give any sort of life advice to anybody, because it always comes out as being told what to do. And I know I don't like to be told what to do. So I would say if I was giving the advice to 23-year-old Jesse, where at your point in life, I was leading a platoon of 49 Rangers over in Iraq, it would have been that right there, because I should not have even survived to this point in my life. I am very fortunate to be alive. And people ask me where I'm from. I say I live in borrowed time because I shouldn't be here. So I always want to try and help people avoid, some of the pitfalls. At the end of my TED talk, what I say is like, listen, you don't have to go all the way down to where I did to start your Phoenix project. Like Lucas Foster, Steve Nyman, all them, they started up here. You can too. Don't wait. And so maybe that advice actually is, don't wait to start that Phoenix project for you, whatever that looks like in your life, which is not going to look like mine. Like, don't wait, start it now. Don't go to wait for your midlife crisis, your first divorce, your first job or company failing or whatever. Start your Phoenix project where you are now. And if you do that, okay, I'm assuming that you think of me as being somewhat successful and have done something that you would hope to do. Some of that factors, otherwise you wouldn't have won me out here. I'm telling you, man, you have an opportunity to get a 15-year head start on me. So if I was able to do what I could do as this decrepit old man, what could you do with that same energy at 23 and that same opportunity? By the time you're my age, man, your scale and your impact is going to just make mine ultimately irrelevant, which is what I want. Because if I can tell enough guys like you that and convince them, like Lucas, like, hey man, your impact, your skill after this is going to change the world. People like you, same thing. It doesn't matter if anyone remembers me because your guys' impact is going to dwarf that. And I want that to happen. So beat me. But I want you to, or at least try.
Yes.
Because also in that process, I'm going to try back. We're both going to get better.
That's great. Competition betters itself. So Jesse, where can people follow you to stay update on everything you're doing? I know on Instagram you can be following.
Yeah, the gram is the one that I was not on social media at all.
Yeah,
3 years ago. There's an amazing woman named Sonia Kilji that I consider being my mentor on the social media plane of existence that helped me with starting all that. And the only reason why I got on was it was in my publishing contract. I had to. I didn't have a choice. Right. And I fought it. They said, nope, you're going to do it. I narrowed it down or negotiated to one platform, and I got to pick it. And I only picked Instagram because I figured that'd be the one I'd fail at the fastest, because that was the one all the snowboarders and stuff were on. And obviously I was not going to personally relate to any of them. So the fact that that is where it is now I just blows my mind and is total credit to people that have helped on that. And so at AM300 Phoenix is all social media platforms. Right. And of course, Instagram. Our website is am300.com. And you go on there, like that's kind of the hub for all this stuff, the warrior athlete stuff, the book stuff. And then my TED Talk is also located on there. So that's a good 14-minute summary of what we talked about. Sure. So if someone asks you about me or something, be like, hey, let me save you the time. Here's the Clip Notes version. Yeah, that's where I am. And then I'm always running around somewhere, finding something to compete at, finding someone who wants to listen and attempt to share and learn from them the hard-fought wisdom to get better and win.
Sure. Well, Jesse, I just want to thank you again for talking with me this morning. I know how early it is. I want to thank you for your service, not just overseas in the military, but also your service to everybody back home. I know your TED Talks, your podcasts that you've done in the past, advising these athletes has been so impactful on so many people. So I wanted to thank you for that. And again, I appreciate you talking to me very much.
Hey, it was my honor, man. And thanks for having me on. And thanks for being as resilient and persevering as you were. And thank you for your grace in terms of working around my family situation. That is appreciated. And I look forward to hopefully continuing talking with you in the future, teasing out some more of this stuff. And maybe we can find a way to get you involved with some of the collaboration efforts with AM300.
Oh, I would love that. That'd be wonderful. That'd be
all right, man. Well, we have a term whenever we see an officer, a senior officer, we say Rangers lead the way, sir, and always reply back all the way. And whenever, like, how I know impact has been made with these athletes is every single text message you see from Lucas and Josh, you'll see RLTW at the bottom of it. And, you know, it's their way of honoring, you know, my service and keeping it relevant and recognizing it. And when you get a chance, Google the Ranger Creed.
Okay.
You're the first person who's not tried to ask me what's the difference between Rangers and Navy SEALs. And I appreciate that.
Oh,
But the main difference, I would say, is we have a creed. To my knowledge, they do not. And that creed still hangs on the wall downstairs in my living room, and I still live it to this day. And it's something that I never saw as an option to stop living. So when you get a chance, check it out. It'll give you more context to some of the things we talked about.
no, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Jesse. I really appreciate it.
All right, my friend. Rangers lead the way.
All the way.